thank you very much. So, reflections on the voice of the silence. This is in two parts. We're looking at fragment one in two parts. So the challenges, the rewards, and the necessary disciplines that we associate with treading the spiritual path are most beautifully and aptly described in H.P.B's classic The Voice of the Silence. This comprehensive poetic manual of spiritual instruction, insight, and inspiration is a translation of fragments from a sacred book which she encountered during her studies in the East, the Book of the Golden Precepts. The preface to The Voice of the Silence states that the original precepts are engraved on thin oblongs. They are written variously, sometimes in Tibetan, but mostly in ideographs. The sacerdotal language, brackets Senzar, besides an alphabet of its own, may be rendered in several modes of writing in cipher characters, which partake more of the nature of ideographs than of syllables. And H.P.B informs us that the mystery language of Senzar, unknown to philologists, forms the basis of the stanzas of Jan, the core of the secret doctrine. She describes Senzar as the secret sacerdotal tongue from the words of divine beings who dictated it to the sons of light in Central Asia at the very beginning of the fifth hour race. For there was a time when its language, the Senzar, was known to the initiates of every nation. And commenting upon Senzar, the theosophist John Algeo states, the mystery language is what we now call symbolism. It speaks to our unconscious minds and can only be imperfectly translated into ordinary logical language. And by developing our subjective resources and in nurturing the symbolic life, we can receive direction and guidance from the higher self. The higher self, of course, resides within the unconscious realm of our psyche. By this process, we accelerate the construction of the antakarana, the structure which links soul and personality, whose constituents are derived from the energies of the plane of higher manas, or abstract thought, this being the current frontier of human consciousness. And by engaging in the practice of abstract thought, we can obtain spiritual insight and meaning located beyond the level of our lower finite mind. And in doing so, we free ourselves from the dominion of the astral body and its associated desires. Abstract thought relates to our capacity to think about matters that do not concern our survival instincts, nor the fulfillment of our various desires. And we develop abstract thought through the study of the wisdom teachings, and especially through contemplating the symbolism of myth, the esoteric symbolism of hieroglyphic cipher-like characters, and through interpreting the symbolism of dreams. And it is via the antakarana that the contents of the causal, arupic or formless levels of consciousness, where the soul resides, are conveyed to us primarily through the medium of symbolic language. Symbolism plays a most important part in our striving to access the soul, whereby we can obtain guidance, direction, and spiritual meaning. The Indologist Heinrich Zimmer had a long-standing relationship with Carl Jung. Of course, Jung famously informs us that archetypes, or divine ideas, manifest within the human psyche as symbols. And on the subject of symbolism, Zimmer states, the mind can soar and enter the supernal sphere on the wings of symbols, which represent the truth beyond the pairs of opposites, eluding by those wings the bird net of the basic principle of earthbound human logic, the pedestrian principle of the incompatibility of opposites. For what transcendent means is the transcending, among other things, of the bounding and basic logical laws of the human mind. So our evolutionary growth is related to the unfolding of consciousness. And when we engage with the esoteric classics, especially the voice of the silence, our consciousness expands. It penetrates new subjective horizons. And the metaphorical text then reciprocates by revealing deeper and deeper layers of symbolic meaning as part of an ongoing symbiotic relationship. And this can assist us in gaining deeper understanding of ourselves and of the nature of the path of return, and in negotiating the great challenges that will inevitably confront us. The voice of the silence contains 3 fragments, which constitute 3 distinct works, each addressing aspects of the path. In this talk, I will seek to engage with and apply my existential psyche to the poetic verses of Fragment 1. I seek to unravel a few of the endless layers of meaning found within this classic multivalent text. So I'm just really describing the 3 fragments here, and this is a 2-part talk on Fragment 1, which describes the path, how the aspirant must prepare for the path and for meditation, the underlying metaphysics relating to the path, and the goal of transcendence. So let us now begin. The voice of the silence begins, "These instructions are for those ignorant of the dangers of the lower Idi." Idi is a Pali word equivalent to the Sanskrit siddhis, psychic powers derived from genuine spiritual practices, what we refer to as higher psychism. So the text is beginning in a very cautionary fashion. It is warning the aspirant against engaging with the dense, coarse, illusory, astramental components of the lower Idi or lower psychism. The voice of the silence exhorts the aspirant to venture beyond the energies and forms of the lower planes of consciousness to the spiritual planes of being, located beyond the illusory realms of the personality. The 8 limbs of yoga described in Patanjali's classic Yoga Sutras, they're probably the best illustration of a valid, time-honored route to the acquisition of these supranormal abilities. These are required when one attains the final 8th limb of samadhi, a state of non-dual consciousness, where the finite mind is liberated from its finite consciousness, identifying with the infinite. This most advanced stage of meditation renders one completely aware of the present moment, whereby the experience of omnipotence, omniscience, timelessness, ecstasy, and unity with all life occurs. So in the state of samadhi, one experiences the state of the universe as a whole. This extremely elevated level of consciousness can only be retained for short periods and degrees of efficiency. We could say that samadhi is graded and intermittent. And Patanjali's great work informs us to avoid the desire for psychic powers or the practice of extreme austerity. Rather, we're advised to pursue the time-honored practice of the 8 limbs. The first 2 of these being universal morality, ethical standards, and self-discipline and personal observances. And these provide the foundation for the yoga postures, breath control. Then we have withdrawal of the senses, concentration, meditation, ultimately leading to samadhi. If we are to become the voice of the silence, then we must be blind to the siren-like allure of lower psychism. The return voyage of Odysseus to Ithaca and the many adventures he must undergo before uniting with his father Laertes, who is a symbol of the monad, and his wife Penelope, symbolically relates to the path of return. The union of Odysseus and Penelope also describes the hieros gamos, or sacred marriage of the medieval alchemists, outlined more recently by Jung's concept of individuation. These are each representations of the higher initiations described by theosophical writings. And in one of his adventures, Odysseus must pass the sirens, whose beautiful, enchanting voices cause sailors to shipwreck on the rocky coast of their island. And to negotiate the passage, Odysseus plugs the ears of his crew with beeswax, whilst he fastens himself to the ship's mast, ordering his crew not to release him till his ship has passed the Sirens' Island. And the sweet and seductive song of the Sirens promises Odysseus knowledge of all future events on earth, and he shouts to his men to release him under the threat of death. However, his men adhere to his earlier commands and tighten his bonds. The ship then sails safely onwards. So the sirens here represent the lure of the transient and the seductive powers of the lower id, and the illusion or maya that these induce. Odysseus's crew symbolizes the five senses, which are subjected to the force of his will, represented by him stuffing their ears with beeswax. The symbolism here suggests the Patanjali stage of pratyahara, withdrawal of the senses, where the aspirant enforces this withdrawal, seeking to quell the dualistic lower mind so that one may penetrate into higher states of consciousness. We come on to the next verse. He who would hear the voice of nada, the soundless sound, and comprehend it, he has to learn the nature of dharana. Having become indifferent to objects of sense perception, the pupil must seek out the Raja of the senses, the thought producer, he who awakens illusion. The mind is the great slayer of the real. Let the disciple slay the slayer. So the Sanskrit word nada means sound. Nada Brahma refers to the sounds of the divine. It is our mind or mental body, the Raja of the senses, which stands between us and the higher self, its constant chatter deafening us to the inner voice. In accord with the 8 limbs of yoga, we must learn the nature of dharana or focus if we are to apprehend the voice of the silence. In Buddhism, the undisciplined mind is metaphorically described as the chattering monkey, due to it possessing a restless and unsettled nature. The mind is in constant movement. It continually assumes the forms and colors of everything presented to it by our senses, our imagination, our emotions, and by our memory. And in the vast majority of humanity, most thoughts are driven by the astral body as a means of satisfying its various desires. Indian teachings describe this as karma manas, mind contaminated by desire. And karma manas arises through identification with and attachment to the transient objects and circumstances of the material world. And we cannot express the immortal, enduring aspect of our being if our efforts in life are based upon and driven by the pursuit of matters of an impermanent nature. Here we see a Herculean labor, Diomedes devoured by his horses. The labors of Hercules symbolize various challenges related to the treading of the path. And in this particular labor, the 8th one, Hercules must capture 4 savage, man-eating, uncontrollable horses that belong to King Diomedes of Thrace. The symbolism here relates essentially to the control and focus of the mind. We could say the mares of the mind must be tethered and harnessed to the intent of the soul, rather than functioning as instruments of the desire nature, where karma manas effectively devours our spiritual potential. So to effectively harness the symbolic mares, thereby slaying the slayer, we must adopt spiritual practices that enable us to build the antakarana, the bridge between soul and personality. By undertaking meditation, in accord with the 8 limbs of yoga, we strengthen and widen the antakarana, whereby it will eventually become a floodgate for the energies of the soul. Also, of course, in terms of mind control, we have the wonderful symbolism of the charioteer found in the Tat Tvam Upanishad. Here we see the mind symbolized as the reins controlling the horses, which represent the senses. The next verse states, when to himself his form appears unreal, as do on waking all the forms he sees in dreams, when he has ceased to hear the many, he may discern the one, the inner sound which kills the outer. Then only, not till then, shall he forsake the region of Asat, the false, to come unto the realm of Sat, the true. These verses then inform us of the illusory nature of the material world and of the requirement of discrimination, what the Hindus call viveka, discrimination between the real and the unreal, that is, between the spiritual and the transient. And it is by accessing the voice of the silence that our consciousness is elevated to the realm of Sat, or ultimate being, when the inner sound kills the outer. In the sound, which kills the outer, is accessed, we then forsake the region of Asat, the unreal. The Platonic doctrine of recollection or anamnesis, found in the books the Meno and the Phaedo, states that we are born possessing all knowledge, and our realization of this is contingent upon its discovery. Plato believed that long before our bodies existed, our souls inhabited a heavenly realm where they became directly acquainted with the forms or ideas that relate to the divine intent, this being described in Plato's Republic. Plato emphasized that real knowledge, i.e., that related to the forms or ideas, cannot be gained through sensory experience, but rather through the memory of our initial acquaintance with the forms in heaven. Many commentators consider Orphism to underlie a significant amount of Greek philosophy, including Plato's work. The Orphic mysteries describe the presence of the river Lethe, the waters of forgetfulness, within the underworld of Hades. They describe how the incarnating soul drinks from the well of Lethe, thereby losing sight of its divine origins. And to address this matter, Orphic practitioners led deeply ascetic lives and they were strict vegetarians. They undertook spiritual practices in the belief that in the afterlife, they would be able then to drink from the well of Mnemosyne, the goddess of memory. On this basis, the aspirant would apprehend the inner voice, thereby recollecting their divine origins and forsaking the realm of Asat. Before the soul can see, the harmony within must be attained, and all fleshly eyes be rendered blind to all illusion. Before the soul can hear, the image, human, has to become as deaf to roarings as to whispers, to cries of bellowing elephants as to the silvery buzzing of the golden firefly. Before the soul can comprehend and may remember, she must unto the silent speaker be united, just as the form to which the clay is modelled is first united with the potter's mind. For then the soul will hear and will remember, and then to the inner ear will speak the voice of the silence. The symbol of the soul is potter, molding the clay of the personality upon the wheel of rebirth, is particularly apt. And of course, it takes many lives for the higher self to fashion a suitable instrument of spiritual expression in the material world. We see here a potter creating an urn. Symbolically, we could view this as a receptacle and dispenser of spiritual energies. This requires the clay of many personalities to be modeled upon the rotating wheel of rebirth. In each member of the human kingdom, the soft malleable symbolic clay must be gradually fashioned into a structure in accordance with the intent of the higher self. And throughout the course of our many incarnations upon the zodiacal wheel, we are slowly molded into a suitable spiritual receptacle. The zodiacal wheel must rotate many times before our personality vehicles, physical, astral, and mental bodies, are fused into a coherent and integrated structure, enabling the soul to fulfill its intent. And as we are slowly and progressively molded into a suitable spiritual instrument for divine energies, we become eligible for the next stage of the evolutionary process. The pot must be placed into a kiln, what Theosophy refers to as the burning ground of initiation, so that it can then hold the waters of the higher planes of consciousness and dispense them accordingly. So the urn must be fired, and before the firing it is glazed, whereby it is given its existential design in the form of its share of the evolutionary plan. That is when the urn is glazed and fired and capable of receiving the spiritual waters, pouring them out accordingly. Very Aquarian symbol. The symbolic urn then functions as an exemplar of the archetypal process of spiritual transformation. And we witness this, of course, in the lives of great souls who have passed before us. I would include here Gautama Buddha, Socrates, Plato, Jesus of Nazareth, Shankara, H.P.B, Paramahansa Yogananda, to name but a few. If thy soul smiles while bathing in the sunlight of life, if thy soul sings within a chrysalis of flesh and matter, if thy soul weeps inside a castle of illusion, if thy soul struggles to break the silver thread that binds it to the master, know, O disciple, thy soul is of the earth. There is a famous Hermetic axiom of as above, so below, attributed to Hermes Trismegistus. It outlines the correspondence between microcosm and macrocosm. And in the last verse, the chrysalis of flesh alludes to the symbolism of the stages of spiritual growth depicted in the transformation of a caterpillar to a butterfly. The caterpillar represents humanity in its common state of awareness of waking sleep, a restricted level of everyday subject-object consciousness. The life of the caterpillar is a two-dimensional one. The caterpillar is confined to crawling around on the surface of life, and its primary concern is that of eating. And the caterpillar, like the majority of humanity, views life from a strictly practical or utilitarian purpose. The following chrysalis stage relates to a process of withdrawal, where the caterpillar abandons its previous life, finding a sheltered spot where it can pupate within its chrysalis. Those unaware of what is happening here may perceive the caterpillar as being idle or dormant. However, of course, it is undergoing immense change, a transformation that will enable it to penetrate into new and higher dimensions. And similarly, the higher self reaches a saturation point in terms of acquiring experience in the material world. The personality, as a mechanism of the higher self, then experiences what we call divine unrest, where the transient affairs of everyday life are no longer enough. They don't satisfy one. They don't sustain one. And that is when the spiritual path beckons. Here we see this similar symbolism in the tarot card of the hanged man hanging upside down, an overturning of one's consciousness. Note that the legs are in the shape of a swastika or full-foot cross, indicating the energies of Fohat, which the aspirant is seeking to attune to. And just as the world of the butterfly is incomprehensible to the caterpillar, so the state of being of one who has experienced the voice of the silence, what in the West we call cosmic consciousness, is meaningless to one who has yet to glimpse reality beyond the state of waking sleep or subject-object consciousness. The butterfly is a symbol for one who has removed the shackles imposed upon them by the five senses and the desire nature, one who experiences the light of the causal realms, having journeyed upwards to confront the light of one's divine essence. And unlike the caterpillar, the butterfly has freedom of movement. It lives in space but can return to the surface level of life. The butterfly understands relationships occurring within the realm of the caterpillar, but is also aware of an entirely different, higher dimension which the caterpillar is completely oblivious to. Symbolism is very obvious here, of course. When to the world's turmoil thy budding soul lends ear, when to the roaring voice of the great illusion thy soul responds, when frightened at the sight of the hot tears of pain, when deafened by the cries of distress, thy soul withdraws like the shy turtle within the carapace of selfhood. Learn, O disciple, of her silent God, thy soul is an unworthy shrine. So although it is formless, the soul is commonly symbolized as a lotus-like structure, seeking to unfold symbolic petals of knowledge, love, and sacrifice. And towards these ends, our divine essence, the monad, plants its seed into the material world. The words in the last verse, budding soul, refer to the higher self at the stage of enmeshment with the material world. But importantly, there is the potential to blossom into a flower, displaying its beauty and emitting its fragrance. In Buddhist teachings, the lake's cavity is where all the souls of humanity exist. We can relate this to theosophical Devashan. And it's important to note, just like lotuses, souls are all at a different stage of unfoldment. Some are at stage of budding, others are beginning to open their tiers of petals, and some are fully opened, displaying their beauty and emitting their fragrance. When waxing stronger, thy soul glides forth from her secure retreat, and breaking loose from the protecting shrine, extends her silver thread and rushes onward. When beholding her image on the waves of space, she whispers, "This is I." Declare, O disciple, that thy soul is caught in the webs of delusion. This earth, disciple, is the hall of sorrow, wherein are set along the path of dire probations traps to ensnare thy ego by the delusion called the great heresy. This earth, O ignorant disciple, is but the dismal entrance leading to the twilight that precedes the valley of true light, the light which no wind can extinguish, that light which burns without a wick or fuel. So the webs of delusion refer here to immersion within the ephemeral realms of Maya, where the great heresy exerts its hegemony in many ways. Here is an image where I'm indicating the dismal entrance leading to the twilight in the valley of true light. So the dismal entrance is a physical world, and the inner penetrating astral and lower mental planes, and beyond and underlying these is the valley of true light. Saith the great law, in order to become the knower of all self, thou hast first of self to be the knower, to reach the knowledge of that self. Thou hast to give up self to non-self, being to non-being, and then thou canst repose between the wings of the great bird, aye, sweet as rest between the wings of that which is not born nor dies, but as the Om throughout eternal ages. Bestride the bird of life if thou wouldst know, give up thy life if thou wouldst live. So the giving up of self to non-self requires that we realize our essential nature. One of the great Mahavakyas, or sayings of the Upanishads as Tat Tvam Asi, which translates as thou art that. This refers to our spiritual essence, the monad, whose instrument, the soul, engages upon a long evolutionary journey on the Wheel of Rebirth as a means of unfolding its latent qualities. The great bird is Kala-Hamsa, the swan, which was related to the ultimate transcendent reality, Parabrahman. The great bird is a symbol for the Om, the note of creation, sounded by the transcendent being, whilst the bird's flight symbolizes liberation from the Wheel of Rebirth. 3 halls, O weary pilgrim, lead to the end of toils. 3 halls, O conqueror of Mara, will bring thee through 3 states into the 4th and thence into the 7 worlds, the worlds of rest eternal. If thou wouldst learn their names, then hearken and remember. H.P.B describes Mara as that which kills the soul. This is found in the footnotes. It is represented as a king with a crown in which shines a jewel of such luster that it binds those who look at it. This luster referring, of course, to the fascination exercised by vice upon certain natures. The name of the first hall is ignorance, avidya. It is the hall which thou sowest delight, in which thou livest and shalt die. The name of the second hall is the hall of learning. In it thy soul will find the blossoms of life, but under every flower a serpent coiled. The name of the third hall is wisdom, beyond which stretch the shoreless waters of Akshara, the indestructible fount of omniscience. So we are informed of our necessary passage through 3 halls, ignorance, learning, and wisdom, before we enter the state of turiya, which the Advaita Vedanta teaching describe as the state of pure consciousness, both underlying and beyond those of waking, sleeping, and dreamless sleep. And this is realized by the attainment of samadhi, by apprehending the voice of the silence. So the hall of ignorance here describes the phenomenal world of 5 senses, which, as we've seen, induce a waking sleep upon humanity. Illusion prevails as the one life appears as many separate and distinct lives, and the affairs of the transient phenomenal world as real and enduring. And as spiritual aspirants, we must turn away from the phantom apparitions on the wall of Plato's symbolic cave, to tread upwards and out of the cave into the daylight to experience the voice of the silence. If thou wouldst cross the first hall safely, let not thy mind mistake the fires of lust that burn therein for the sunlight of life. If thou wouldst cross the second safely, stop not the fragrance of its stupefying blossoms to inhale. If freed thou wouldst be from the karmic chains, seek not for thy guru in those Mayavic regions. The wise ones tarry not in pleasure grounds of the senses. The wise ones heed not the sweet-tongued voices of illusion. Seek for him who is to give thee birth in the hall of wisdom, the hall which lies beyond, wherein all shadows are unknown, and where the light of truth shines with unfading glory. That which is uncreate abides in thee, disciple, as it abides in that hall. If thou wouldst reach it and blend the two, thou must divest thyself of thy dark garments of illusion, stifle the voice of flesh, allow no image of the senses to get between its light and thine, that thus the twain may blend in one. And having learnt thine own ayana, ignorance, flee from the hall of learning. This hall is dangerous in its perfidious beauty, is needed but for thy probation. Beware Lanu, Lanu being a Sanskrit word for seeker of truth. Beware lest dazzled by elusive radiance, thy soul should linger and be caught in its deceptive life. So the higher self, as the instrument of the monad, is uncreate and abides in thee within the hall of wisdom. The hall of learning, serves a probationary purpose as a school where lessons are learned, which serve to unfold the lotus petals of the soul. The lessons are designed to enable the fusion of soul and personality, whereby the aspirant is able to blend the two, as symbolized here by the interlaced triangles of the theosophical logo. In esoteric astrology, we state that the soul is seeking to unfold knowledge petals on the mutable cross, where one experiences the outer world and gains knowledge of it, forming attachment after attachment, only for these to be continually broken. The soul then mounts a fixed cross where there is the confrontation between the instincts and desires on the one hand and the pull of the higher self on the other. Many lives elapse before the soul mounts a cardinal cross, the cross of the initiate, where the sacrifice petals are folded through great sacrifices for the benefit of humanity. This light shines from the jewel of the great ensnarer, brackets Mara. The senses it bewitches blind the mind and leaves the unwary an abandoned wreck. The moth attracted to the dazzling flame of thy night lamp is doomed to perish in the viscid oil. The unwary soul that fails to grapple with the mocking demon of illusion will return to earth the slave of Mara. The great ensnarer, Mara, is portrayed in the challenges that faced Prince Siddhartha prior to his illumination. After undergoing various spiritual disciplines and encountering different teachers, Siddhartha arrives at a tree, the Bodhi tree, seating himself at the point referred to as the immovable spot, which is really the interface between transcendence and creation manifest. He assumes a meditation posture, vowing not to rise from this until he has attained perfect enlightenment. And at dusk, the demon Mara tries to deflect him from his goal. Firstly, he sends his 3 beautiful daughters to seduce him, but Siddhartha is unmoved due to the powers of his concentration. Mara then assails Siddhartha with an army of terrifying demons and then attacks the prince himself, but on each occasion, the force of Siddhartha's concentration proves too strong. He remains in meditation until dawn, when he attains perfect illumination, thereby becoming the Buddha. Behold the hosts of souls, watch how they hover over the stormy sea of human life, and how exhausted, bleeding, broken-winged, they drop one after other on the swelling waves, tossed by the fierce winds, chased by the gale. They drift into the eddies and disappear within the first great vortex. If through the hall of wisdom thou wouldst reach the vale of bliss, disciple, close fast thy senses against the dire heresy of separateness that weans thee from the rest. So the dire heresy of separateness relates to our Maya-propelled misperceptions which prevent us from realizing our true nature, para-Brahman or nirguna Brahman, meaning without the gunas. The gunas are the 3 fundamental forces, which are first described in Samkhya philosophy, whose interplay gives rise to and sustains creation, whilst also inducing Maya. The gunas listed here are tamas, darkness and chaos, rajas, activity and passion, and sattva, beingness and harmony. Nirguna Brahman, beyond the gunas, possesses no qualities, but it is described as possessing this threefold nature of ultimate being, pure consciousness, and bliss, Satchit Ananda. And this is our theosophical monad. Saguna Brahman, or Ishvara, is Brahman with the gunas, or also described as Ishvara. This is Brahman's dream of the world, or Maya. In the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, the first objective for the aspirant is to increase sattva guna, thereby promoting serenity and spiritual clarity. However, the ultimate goal is to transcend the gunas, thus attaining liberation from the wheel of rebirth. In the Bhagavad Gita, the righteous Pandava warrior Arjuna asks his charioteer Krishna, an incarnation of the god Vishnu, how to recognize one who is free from the effects of the gunas. What are their behaviors, and how may one themselves become free of these? And Krishna replies, O Pandava, the one who is not afraid of joy, activity, and errors, and yet does not long for them when they pass away, who is not shaken by manifestations of the gunas, and saying, gunas act, stays aloof, uninvolved, steady in situations of happiness and sorrow, self-confident, to whom a clod, a stone, and gold are equal, immutable amidst the pleasant and unpleasant, amidst praise and blame, same in honor and dishonor, equal towards a friend and a foe, striving not for prosperity in the material world. Such one is free from the three gunas. The voice of the silence proceeds, let not thy heaven born, merged in the sea of Maya, break from the universal parent, but let the fiery power retire into the inmost chamber, the chamber of the heart and the abode of the world's mother. The fiery power and the world's mother each refer to Kundalini, the latent feminine Shakti energy, the sleeping serpent found in the Muladhara chakra at the base of the spine. The goal of the aspirant is to raise Kundalini up the central Sushumna Nadi to the Sahasrara chakra, the thousand-petal lotus in the head region, where it ultimately unites with the Supreme Being Shiva. This affects the Hieros Gamos, a microcosmic representation of the act of creation that gives rise to and sustains our universe, where the antagonistic yet complementary opposites of manifestation are resolved through the attainment of transcendence. So, in the wisdom teachings, we talk of three fiery energies. There is the electric fire of the monad, solar fire relating to the soul or higher self, and fire by friction, the energy latent in matter. And by undertaking spiritual practices, we concentrate solar fire, the energies of the soul, into our aura. And at an advanced stage, this attracts the attention of the monad, and there is a descent of electric fire into the head region, which coaxes the Kundalini fire upwards, vivifying the various chakras in the process of initiation. Then from the heart, that power shall rise into the sixth, the middle region, the place between thine eyes, when it becomes the breath of the one soul, the voice which filleth all, the master's voice. Another image of the chakras here. And a major emphasis is placed upon transmuting and sublimating desire when we tread the path. The energies of the astral plane are focused upon the solar plexus chakra found in the abdominal region. The astral body will synthesize these energies so that we can use them for personal ends, Maya-related endeavors, or we can use them for spiritual and creative ends. And the key towards achieving the latter is by transmuting the solar plexus chakra energies into those of the heart chakra. Therefore, we seek to express heart chakra qualities such as unconditional and inclusive forms of love, compassion, empathy for others, inner peace, and courage to confront the challenges of the path. And last but not least, discrimination, the ability to discriminate between the real and the unreal. 'Tis only then thou canst become a walker of the sky, who treads the winds above the waves, whose step touches not the water. Christianity describes the miracle of Christ walking on water. the Buddha levitates over the Rohini River and he teleports across the river Ganges. And in each instance here, the avatar is a walker of the sky. The symbolism here illustrating that spirit travels over the sea of Maya and that these miracles are a function of spirit. Here's an image of Joseph Campbell, the great 20th century mythologist, who's best known for his work entitled The Hero with a Thousand Faces, whereby Campbell describes the hero's journey, a motif of adventure and personal transformation employed within the mythical framework of many cultures. And of course, we relate the hero's journey to the challenges and rewards of the path. Why do I mention this? Because the filmmaker George Lucas was an avid admirer of Campbell's writings, and he employed his hero's journey as a model for his epic space opera Star Wars. So I'm proposing that it's perhaps not more than coincidence that the questing hero in these adventures happens to be called Luke Skywalker. Just my opinion. Before thou sets thy foot upon the ladder's upper rung, the ladder of the mystic sounds, thou hast to hear the voice of thy inner God, in brackets higher self, in 7 manners. So the text then employs symbolic sounds relating to the first 6 levels or subplanes of the Buddhic plane, one of the planes of the soul, and the effect of the upward passage of Kundalini as the aspirant's consciousness experiences these exalted realms. So this, of course, is very poetic. The first is like the nightingale's sweet voice chanting a song of parting to its mate. The second comes as the sound of a silver symbol of the dhyanis, awakening the twinkling stars. The next is as the plaint melodious of the ocean sprite imprisoned in its shell. And this is followed by the chant of Veena, Veena being an Indian musical instrument. The fifth like sound of bamboo flute shrills in thine ear. It changes next into a trumpet blast. The last vibrates like the dull rumbling of a thunder cloud. So these levels are experienced through the progressive ascent of Kundalini, enabling one's consciousness to reach the 7th Buddhic subplane, which then enables access to the succeeding plane of Atma, that of the self or pure consciousness. And the verse states, the 7th swallows all the other sounds, they die and are heard no more. When the 6 are slain and at the master's feet are laid, then is the pupil merged into the one, becomes that one, and lives therein. So this verse, of course, is describing that highly advanced state of consciousness transcending the aforementioned gunas, when moksha or liberation from the wheel of rebirth has been attained, when the individual consciousness is absorbed into that of the divine. The text then proceeds to outline necessary prerequisites before such an exalted state of consciousness can be attained. Before that path is entered, thou must destroy thy lunar body, cleanse thy mind body, and make clean thy heart. Eternal life's pure waters, clear and crystal, with the monsoon tempest muddy torrents cannot mingle. The lunar body is referring to desire situated within the astral body. Of course, desire is healthy for the young soul. It enables the monad to experience everything life in form has to offer. As we go on many incarnations in the various races and cultures of our world, desire urges us to activate latent psychic energies, to develop faculties, to expand our consciousness. But it comes at a cost, with desire creating attachments to objects, to circumstances, and to people. And these serve as metaphorical chains, binding us to the material world, creating many karmic entanglements within the realm of matter. And when we tread the path, the energies, as I said, concentrated within the solar plexus chakra related to desire, must be elevated to its alter ego, the heart chakra. That is how we free ourselves from the chains which bind us to in Plato's symbolic cave, where we are fixated upon the wall or the world of the five senses. The medieval alchemists used the phrase solve et coagula to describe the process of spiritual transformation, and this relates to the cleansing of the aforementioned lunar body, where the existing personality undergoes a process of dissolution, hence the word solve. Then it coagulates, it is reassembled at a higher point of consciousness, which enables infusion from the soul, which is going to enable the higher initiations of theosophy to occur. Roberto Assagioli, who had a theosophical background, his mother and wife were theosophers, he used the term psychosynthesis to describe this. I said, the existing personality is deconstructed, then reassembled at a higher point of consciousness, which enables soul infusion to occur, or as he called it, psychosynthesis. Now, that is part one. Part two occurs next week. I imagine most of you are old enough to have watched the old Batman series in the late 1960s, where at the end, you know, we would say same time, same channel next week. And that's what's going to happen here. Will the venturing aspirant survive the clutches of the goddess of Maya? Tune in next week, same time, same channel.